Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, Jesse Vallee. Jesse, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I always love when I can get somebody from TikTok or Instagram or Twitter that's just like kind of random because it makes me feel like the algorithm's working. Does that make sense?
It
Um,
does.
I go everywhere. Like I go on Threads, I go on Instagram. My wife, she's like, "You're always like." It looks like I'm doing just like mess around on my phone. She's like, "You're like fishing," as we like to call it. And that's like all I
Oh,
do.
fish away.
Yeah, I know. But it's just crazy that she goes, "I can't believe." I said something about the other day, with a new author, and she's like, "I can't believe that there's anybody you don't know by now because of where you're going." And she goes, "People send you stuff all the time." I'm like, "I know." I'm like, "It's nuts." But yeah, so I think it was a couple months ago, I found your TikTok page and I saw your book and I was just like, "Yep, that's definitely for me." Yeah, I was so glad that we could get you on. Thank you so much again for being flexible. It's the end of the school year, so it's just always nuts. And then now I have a small
Oh
child,
yeah.
so he's always bringing stuff into the house, not fun stuff. So all his germs and things like that from daycare. But yeah, I'm so glad to get you on today and to get to really talk about your writing journey. So we'll start right with that first one. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Oof. So I'm currently a self-published author. The how I got to be one story is a bit unorthodox. I never planned to be an author a few years back because I work in the wildlife industry and I had a
Okay.
contract that was a little bit remote and it was a lot of twiddling my thumbs for 12 hours a day with almost nothing to do, no internet. And I was just trying to figure out how am I going to pass the time. I'm a big reader, but when you read all the books that you packed with you, you start to get a little bit bored. And I
Yeah.
started writing just to pass the time. It was really just for me. This job was contractual, so it was only a few months. And I started writing. I had this small little idea of a story in my mind, and I went with it. And by the end of my contract, I realized that I was almost I pretty much wrote almost an entire novel,
Oh wow.
and I wasn't expecting it. I was just writing for me to pass the time. It wasn't meant to go anywhere, but I told myself that if I finished writing it, then I wanted to get it out into the world. And I think it took me a year or two. I can't remember the timeline anymore, but a year or two just to finish the last several chapters of the first draft. And then once I finished it, I dove right into the publishing journey because I wrote this book. It's something I should be proud of. And there aren't many people that can say I published a book in my life. So
Yeah.
it was never my intention to write a book. I never meant to publish anything. It really just started as a journey for me to pass the time for my own enjoyment. And here we are today. I'm the author of a published novel.
Yeah. So you said a lot of really cool things there. So one, really cool working anything, in terms of wildlife. I have a friend that is really kind of switching fields and is that's like really what he's going to school for now. So super cool. You might have a couple urban fantasy people coming your way now that will be asking you, different experiences and stuff. I've seen that quite
Yeah.
a bit recently, which is kind of cool. My friend's been asked quite a few questions recently on TikTok from just like some different people, so it's kind of interesting in that field. But you said you weren't expecting this like journey, but I had read a quote recently somewhere, and it was just so funny because the person had said he said that those are the stories that really want to be told, are the ones that are most unexpected. So I kind of
I
find that
love
really
that.
interesting,
And I think
right?
there's a lot of accuracy in it too.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's funny because I think I read that like 2 weeks ago. And yeah, it's just kind of interesting that, that's what you say. And I have a couple of friends, from this podcast and just in general now in the indie community where they've had the same thing, where that's like I was talking to about my novella and people like, why did you stop doing this? I'm like, this character will not stop talking my ear off, and gotta gotta get this one out there first just to shut them up, and but yeah, I think that that's really cool. I think a lot of people, here could connect with that type of feeling. But I love how you're like, yeah, I'm bored, I'm gonna write a book. Like I'm gonna choose one of the hardest things to do on the planet. So that's really cool. I commend you for that. And you're like, oh, it took me a year. Like it took me, I think, the last 25% of just this novella to fix and edit. I think it took me about a year. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
commend
sounds about
you. That's a
right.
short time, I feel like. So that's really cool.
Yeah, so I mean, I wrote most of my book in this span. My contract at the time was 3 months, and then it took me another year or two, I can't remember the timeline, to finish just the last few chapters because I went back to your typical 9 to 5 job, and
Mm,
suddenly, like, I no longer have time to write, I no longer have the energy to do it. But once I finally got it out there and I started the publishing process, I hired publishing services because I had no idea what I was doing.
yeah, yeah,
And they told me it would take about a year to publish my book, but I'm very much, if I have like a to-do list, someone's waiting on me for something, I got to get it done immediately. So every time I'd submit something to them and they'd send it back for my review or approval or any commentary, I would get that done immediately. So instead of it taking an entire year, it was a 9 month process for me personally. And I mean, even that was completely exhausting, especially since I
yeah,
also had the day job going. So it was for like 9 months, I worked two full-time jobs essentially. I would work my
yeah,
day job and then I'd come home at the end of the day and I would spend hours reviewing the edits, reviewing the proofreads, giving feedback for the design, et cetera, et cetera. It was
yeah,
nuts.
yeah. Oh, well, I like how you also mentioned something that's going on within the community this week. Talking about like number of hours. Peter McLean has talked about this on his Facebook. Friend Scott Oden had mentioned this too. And I have friends that are both traditionally published and indie published who are counting up the amount of hours that they've spent roughly on average, right? For their books and trying to say like it's real, and like if you just average the hours. I think Scott Oden said 14,000 hours is essentially what he did for one of the books, right? Which makes sense, right?
Yeah,
If you're
sounds
really
right.
counting everything. And then he said, well, minimum wage would be like this much. And he's like, I'm not gonna ever make that much. And it's crazy to think about though, right? And like I've had a fantasy book that like I had somebody actually ask me, I had a friend ask me, goes, hey, what's up with this book? I'm like, I just haven't finished it yet. I'm like, I finished the draft. I go, it's just not ready. Like their characters are morphing, all these things. I said, I just have to let it sit for a little bit. I might not be at the right level yet, to finish that one, but I
Mhm.
want to, but it's been, I always say 14 years. And then I realized that I'm older, so it's been actually like, oh my God, 20 years, in the making. So, and the amount of hours, there's no way I'd ever be able to calculate that,
Oh,
so,
never.
you know what I mean? Like, so it's just kind of funny when people do that. And I think that's for me personally why I don't ever do 1-star reviews. If I have a book I really didn't like, I feel like I didn't pick the book very well. Because I know how hard it is to write a book, I always tell people, they're like, well, it's a 1-star. I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. I'm like, I'll still read it, because it might be, if it's the book for me. I said, I think some people, take reviews too seriously personally. And, I like your book, I'm like, looked at the cover, saw it immediately, went, checked out the blurb. I'm like, yep, that's my type of book. And I think the rest is, really semantics. But I think if you can understand that, right? I think it helps you out a lot more. Like I know
Yeah.
some people, aren't gonna like my book, or my novellas or whatever, but other people will. Some people don't like Brandon Sanderson. Other people like me really enjoy them. There's certain books that like Mistborn I didn't like as much as like Way of Kings I'm loving right now, or and I think that when you think of it that way, it kind of makes sense. But yeah, I like how you point out it's doing a 9 to 5. I just talked to my friend Herman Stewart Angle. We had a crossover. He's like, I don't know how he's in like web design and stuff. He's like, I work from home remotely. He's like, I don't know how you like. I'm a teacher. He's like, I don't know how you teach, have a kid, and write. I'm like, I just don't do other things. I'm like, I really want to write. So,
That's incredibly accurate. Yeah, and going back
yeah,
to the review portion of it, I'm a very strong believer of every book is for somebody. It might not be for everyone, but there is someone there where that book will be a 5 star for them, even if it's a
yeah,
1 star for someone else. So it's
yeah,
just a matter of reaching your target audience. Is someone into the themes, the tropes, the spice level, as book talk is so obsessed about these
yeah,
days?
yeah, yeah.
It's just a matter of, are you, like you said, choosing the book that you think you will like? Are you good at doing that or not? And you're right, I've never personally given a review under 3 stars. If I didn't like a book, it's likely because I didn't choose it right. But I'd like to think, for the most part, I'm pretty good at knowing what I like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I like how you mentioned that too, though, because I mean, you found me, right? Like I'm out there, I'm looking, and I just found it so funny. I've had you, I think, are maybe literally one of like 75 authors, that I found, within at least the last, couple of months, where I've either bought something, I've, have it on my Kindle. My wife, she's like, I'm gonna stop allowing you to do 20 bucks a month. Because before, I'd buy a book a month, and now those paperbacks are like 20 bucks, before whatever. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's a lot of indie books, on Kindle. My son doesn't like it when I read papers, so now I'm like pretty much just reading Kindle unless there aren't sent to me in the paperbacks. But I just think it's funny. I just want people to point out, right, that you found me. I'm one of your readership. I actually have you for my 2024 list. So if my work can just relax a little bit, I can.
I love that you have to plan out your reading schedule.
So bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. My wife, she came in the last three, like 4 or 5 nights, and like I said, she wasn't really feeling good. So she's like, you've just been asleep. I'm like, I know. She goes, you have like 5 arcs to get through. I'm like, I know. She goes, you have 2 novellas to finish writing. I'm like, I know. Like I just was too tired, But yeah, it's funny though. But I just wanted to point out to people, that, you can find your readership. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it's so funny because they mentioned this and they said like there's however many billion people in the world, right? Like somebody's gonna like your book. There are at least 10,000 people in the world that will like your book. You just have to find them, and I think about it all the time, and as I'm publishing, it just gives me hope. So but I think that's where we'll talk about Kickstarter here in a minute too, where I think Kickstarter comes in, is people literally, you have your audience go, I wanted a comic the other day, or I wanted just to help somebody out, and then I found the prop, at 10 bucks, I was like, I'm gonna use the rest of this that I got, and from like a credit or whatever I had, and I was like, I'm gonna buy something, and that's what I did. I went there specifically, for a specific reason and for particular taste of a product. So I think that that's a really good place where a lot of people can think about going. So can't wait to discuss that. But before we do that, I want to talk about what genre or genres do you currently write in and why?
So I'm the author of a young adult contemporary fantasy. Fantasy in all its subgenres have always been my favorite. Literally all the subgenres. I don't think there's a subgenre of fantasy that I do not like. There's just something about escaping to a world of magic that really draws me in. I started my writing journey in the young adult section because I wanted to produce a book of that young and inspirational hope, the innocence that still whispers of happily ever after, true love, following your heart, believing in your friends, that sort of thing. And as for contemporary, like I mentioned, I started writing for me. And so I wrote What I Know, which is a Canadian setting.
Oh,
So, I
see.
mean, I'm holed up in the middle of nowhere while writing this book in the Canadian forest. Let's write what I know.
No, totally, totally. I people always tease me. They're like, "Well, you write sci-fi too." I'm like, "Yeah, I like started reading sci-fi, but fantasy, I don't know. It's just because I feel like sci-fi, right? A lot of sci-fi, most sci-fi, still has that those real world connotations, right? Whereas fantasy, like you said, it's more of an escape. So in terms of reading and writing, I've tended to go more towards fantasy. Maybe it's because now I'm dealing with all these adult issues, particularly with my career and stuff. So it's nice just to go and to pick up fantasy for me. I did read a couple of really good sci-fis recently. Like Ness Brown was a really good one. The Scourge Between Worlds, just like an amazing book. But I feel you there though. It goes back to the common theme I think a lot of people have said this year on this season is write what you know, right? So I think that, that's really smart on your part, and write what you love, I think is even, even smarter, to do.
Mhm.
And I think that's probably like, don't get me wrong, but what do you think that's why, like you chose the genre and subgenres you did? Do you think that's why it flowed so easily and you're able, to write this? I think it's prolific with the amount of time, you're able to write and publish. So do you think that's why it was a little bit easier for you, do you think, than maybe like a
Yeah,
different genre?
absolutely. My writing really just flowed. I'll talk about this a bit more later, but I'm a pantser in the writing community, where I just write and see where it takes me. I didn't have it plotted out or anything. So I just started writing, and the story just kind of unfolded as I went, which was really cool. And it was definitely easier that it was a contemporary fantasy because it's what I know. But one thing that's really cool that I got a comment of recently a few weeks ago, I was in another podcast, and the host that was interviewing me, she read my book, and she had mentioned that the way that I described the environment, like the trees, the landscape, the wildlife, is in such detail that it reminds her of the writing theme of high fantasies,
Oh
which
wow.
is just the biggest compliment for me because I think those are my favorite types of books. I'm in the midst of reading a book from John Gwynne, The Faithful and the Fallen series.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Absolutely loving it, and having my writing style compared to the descriptors of books like those,
Yeah, yeah.
it's just incredibly humbling. And I think I have a bit of a home field advantage with that because instead of writing about these other worlds that like I've never actually been to, they're all made up. I use that technique with what I know with the forest. So I spent a lot of time in the forest. I'm very much an outdoorsy girl. It's both my day job and my passion in my free time. So being able to describe all the trees, the birds, the landscape, the forest, and put it in a way that the readers can really picture themselves in
Yeah, yeah.
is I think I had a bit of an advantage that I am so familiar with that territory that I could describe it in such detailed descriptors and imagery.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I just want to point out to the audience, I think I can't remember, it was 2, 3 weeks ago, episodes ago, we had mentioned this where, like using your skills, like your own skill set to enhance your writing. So I think that that's a really cool, like I'm a history teacher, so talking about societies or, coming up with different cultures or something like that. I don't know. In terms of world building, I run games and stuff like that, D&D. So there's just different things like that, or, that I think I'm pretty strong at. So I tend to, try and help those things in my story. So I think that for you,
Mhm.
that's really cool, So I just want to point out to the audience, like maybe go, yeah, like I have a friend, right, who, oh my gosh, like what was he doing? It's just like something random. I don't even know. Like I like to metal detect, right? I haven't gone in a couple years, but I love the metal detect. And he put that into like one of his stories, as like a thing. And he used that, let's just say like that example, and it just flowed really easily. There was a guy that I
Mhm.
know who wrote Sci-Fi who um I don't know if anybody remembers. I'm a little older, but some of our audience I found out recently. Um Not Scott, thanks Scott. But like Jag was like the TV series with like the Navy and their lawyers or whatever. So Lindsay Broker, they interviewed this sci-fi for year like 10 years ago on their podcast, but they knew a lot about being a lawyer because they were a lawyer, and they wrote this sci-fi series. Well, then they decided to switch it to be like Jag in space, or like and mix sci-fi with it. And I'm like, they're like, do you remember this TV show? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you gotta check this book out. I'm totally blank on the author now, but like it worked really well, and they wrote from that perspective, like you're saying, something that they knew really well, and I don't know. I've always thought maybe I should do that from a teacher standpoint, like martial arts and combine
I
two
recommend
passions.
it. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I write in the first person point of view, so
Yeah.
in order to write the information that I know and for it to make sense in the book, that means that I had to write a protagonist that knows what I know because I can't go writing,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, a chickadee is singing in the background. Like how would any random person know that that's a
Yeah,
chickadee
yeah, yeah.
song? So I had to write a protagonist that kind of had a bit of the same knowledge that I do. And following up on that, once I started my publishing journey, I came across this Valkyrie training program, which is absolutely incredible. Mini ad, Valkyrie Squad by Sam, Mother of Valkyries. Check it out. It's essentially inspired by the last book in the ACOTAR series, the Valkyries in particular, where you just start warrior training. But I'm not just talking about combat drills, but there are, but it's really a 4 month program or longer if you want to repeat the months, where there's strength, core, balance, mobility. And then later on in the months, as you advance, it gets harder and you start incorporating combat drills into it. But you feel so strong and empowered. And joining that program as I started my editing and publishing process really helped me because my protagonist, she is a warrior herself. So being
Okay.
able to have a bit of that knowledge and the understanding of the training that she must go through and how hard it is to do some of the things that she does really helped with my writing style.
Oh, that's really cool. I'll have to check that out because you said Valkyrie, and I have a Valkyrie in my urban fantasy world who's really cool. So that's really neat. So I'm gonna have to check that out. Um, yeah, I totally agree with you though. People ask me a lot, like what are some different things, that they can do to try and get into that mindset. And a couple of my friends, like Lee Conley, like we recommend doing those kind of things. If you're writing fantasy, like go pick up a sword, not on your own, but he has a what do you call it? He works at a school where they teach long sword, all those kind of things. So it's really cool, but yeah, I think it's different. Like I do a lot of martial arts, so like our style of karate is Washington around here. It's really cool. And it's not a very popular style, but I like it because it engages a lot of other martial arts you can easily put into it. But the weapons training is just really neat. And you never really understand how much damage you can do with a bow staff until you actually have one in your hands. And I think it's just really cool. So I recommend, I think, you have a great suggestion. I recommend trying something like that, and I think I love young adult fantasy, and John Flanagan is one with the Ranger's Apprentice series, and I always thought it was funny. I had a couple kids that read it. That I always suggest it to kids, and they got great female protagonists, supporting characters, and it's just a great series all around. And I said, I was like, why don't you try some of these, things that they're doing to train? And they're like, oh, okay, and then a couple tried them after PE and different stuff. They're like, that's really hard. I'm like, yeah. So now you understand, what these characters have to go through. So I think that's a great suggestion there. I know a couple
Yeah.
people that, went and tried different things, horseback riding, just different stuff like that. And then incorporated that. So I think that's really cool. That's a great suggestion. Um, Oh, you also mentioned, I just want to go back. You also mentioned, taking your knowledge and then figuring how to best, have a character situated where they have that knowledge too. So I just want to point out to the audience, I think that's a really good way to go, right? Because it kind of bugs me, right? When I had that happen in a book the other day, and it didn't totally throw me off, but it kind of threw me off because I'm thinking like, how would the average person know that, it was something in
Yeah.
nature kind of like that. And I'm like, this character from the city. I don't know. It was something like that, and it just like totally threw me off. And then I had to put the book down for a little bit. So I think
I
it's
think it
really
works
good.
a little bit in third person point of view, but when you go to first person and
Yeah, yeah.
it's the protagonist speaking and it's their thought process, it just does not work.
Yep. No, I think that's a totally good way to put it. But I'm just curious because I for like my novellas for urban fantasy and the world, I like first person. I enjoy reading first person perspective from urban fantasy. I know it's kind of the popular one. I was just curious that why exactly you went with first person. Like what was your reason for going with it?
Well, I mean, I think I might have to come back to this often, but I did start writing for me and no one else. And I like the concept that first person really puts you in the shoes of the
Mm,
character. It helps to envelop you in the story. So having first person, writing it out, and then reflecting back, reading it, it really puts you in their shoes. You feel the strength of the character, you feel the turmoil that they go through, as well as the hope and the success. And you I love that it puts you right there in the middle. I feel like with third person point of view, you're a bit detached, and I didn't want any detachment already. I wanted to escape to this other world and be in this world. So that was my main reason.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation for it. I think my friend said you feel feelings more in first person is how at least he
Yep,
how he interprets it. So yeah, I definitely agree. I have some PTSD stuff for my character. Um, he has horrible experiences in the novellas, and that's one reason why he becomes a monster hunter and try to protect people to help them avoid these things. And I'm like, I tried
that's so
doing it
cool.
in person. I know, right? I tried doing it third person and stuff, and I'm like, I had a couple of my friends who are fantasy. authors, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they like their third person, and so do the readers. But yeah, it's just I'm like, I was going back, I'm like, it just doesn't work. And then when I switched to first person, I'm like, same thing. I'm like, you can feel the turmoil there. But I think you can also
Yeah,
feel the triumphs better too. And I think that's why people like the
absolutely.
first person, and yeah, yeah. But I have read some contemporary fantasy where I've absolutely enjoyed the different perspective. Like one of the first times I think I read um, the first person perspective in a contemporary fantasy, I was like, "Ooh, this is different," and I put it down. And then a couple years later, I came back to it, and I was like, I had read some other things, that had first person, different, like urban fantasy stuff like that. I came back and I actually enjoyed it more. So now I don't even worry about the POV really in a book. I kind of worry more about, what the book's about. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think I don't know, I just like first person now, especially from a
Oh,
writing
yeah, I
perspective.
like both point of views. Absolutely. I don't even mind skipping from different point of views. They're all great so long as the writing is great. Just me
Sure.
as a writer, I think that it made my writing better putting myself in the shoes of the protagonist. And I hope my readers feel the same, but I know that it can also be achieved through third person point of view. It's just to help me be a better writer. I wanted to put myself more in my protagonist's shoes.
That's cool. I just want to point out to the audience we have a lot of writers here. So, if a POV isn't working for you, or if it is, go with that, despite what some of your friends may say, like mine. So whatever helps you
Do
write
what
the
works for
best. So,
you. At the end
yep.
of the day, do what works for you.
Yeah, yeah, because they might not be your audience, right? But other people, could be, and you might be limiting your audience by picking the wrong point of view based off of, I want to say the bad advice, I'm going to say the wrong advice, because it might not work for them, but it might work for you, or it might work for your story or characters, like you were saying. So I think that's just great advice for our peeps here. So my favorite question to ask people is about their books. So what is your book, Frost and Shadow: The War of Miracles, about, and how did you come up with this idea?
Oh, all right. So Frost and Shadows, I did not just randomly come up with the idea. It just kind of presented itself to me over time. There was no planning involved whatsoever, but the book is essentially set in the contemporary world, except that a small percentage of the population is either blessed with a gift by angels or cursed by greater demons. And it's only a small percentage of the population, but those that are born gifted by the angels, their entire lives are dictated by what is called the Institute so that they can better serve the community. So as soon as their gifts manifest themselves, they are shipped off to the Institute for training. The Institute decides what their role in the world is going to be so that they could better help the rest of the world. So there's a little dictatorship happening there. There's lack of freedom. And my protagonist, Emma Davis, she's a 17-year-old who's been on the run because she herself is gifted, but she did not want to be separated from her mother. Due to unfortunate circumstances, she ends up joining the Institute anyways, and she ends up finding out that she begrudgingly kind of likes it there because for the first time in her life, she's no longer on the run. She no longer has to hide who she is, and she's around people that are like her. But there's the double-edged sword aspect where on one side, yes, she's making friends for the first time, but on the other side, she knows the wrongs of the Institute. And once she comes across her first cursed human, because more often than not, you come across many animals because it's all living beings that can be born with these gifts. And when she comes across her first cursed human, she's been taught to hate them and to fear them because they have this insatiable hunger to devour the blessed energy that all gifted people have. But this person did not act the way that she expected to, and they just kind of get thrown into this chaotic course of events where the people that the world is trained to hate ends up being the ones that they have to rely on. And Emma learns throughout her journey to rely on her friends, which is something that is completely foreign for her. And there are a lot of themes in the book regarding with trusting your friends for the first time, following your heart and what you believe in rather than what the world expects you to do, and not judging people by the circumstances of their birth.
Well, yeah, a lot of really cool themes there.
Yeah.
Uh, Man, I'm sorry you're saying that. I was thinking you picked I feel like you picked a really good like caveat there with young adult. In particular, I feel like some of your themes would still go over well, if you're, picking adult or whatever you want to go up and say. But
Mhm.
I think young adult's pretty perfect, right? Because you kind of hit that medium for, maybe some more
Yeah.
middle grade, young adult, and then, like myself, adult readers, which is really cool. So yeah, I think that that was really smart on your part.
I really wanted to write a story that was inspirational and gives hope. So it was supposed to be a feel-good story on my part. But then once it became apparent that I did want to publish this book, it was even more so that I wanted the readers, like the young adults, teenagers, to find this protagonist and learn from them and learn you're not all alone in the world. There's hope. You can fight for what you believe in. It was really, I tried to put out that inspirational theme where people can look up to my protagonist and her group of friends.
Well, that's awesome. That's super cool. I think I commend you for that because I don't think a lot of people, they talk about Star Wars and stuff. People ask me like, "What do you like about the original ones so much?" And I said I love the concepts like you're saying, right? With just being able to rely on your friends. I think it's just a theme that I really enjoyed, and I don't know. I love the books, Star Wars books because of that, because no matter who the villain was or what was going on, you knew that like Han, Luke, Leia, Lando, and Chewie, were R2, C3PO, you knew that they were going to do whatever for each other. And I
Yeah.
always thought that was a cool theme,
It's that
and
found family trope that
that found,
you're
yeah,
just
it's just
attached to.
yeah, and my best friend and I talk about that all the time, like, with found family and stuff. And yeah, he's always like like with my wife and I, like he's Uncle Dave, and it's I don't know, I just think it's always so cool to see that because I think especially nowadays, I think people within any society, right? Like I think all of us have found family at some point, right? And I think it's just such a common trope you want to say, but I would say it's such a common theme, that people are maybe still looking for that, So I think you get both crowds, right? You get people like myself who have definitely experienced that, who like that. We also get people who might still be trying to find their, found family, and maybe the people in your book help them a little bit, to put themselves out there, which is really cool. So
I hope
that,
so. I would imagine that most people in the world, especially teenagers, they always have at least one point in their life where they have a lot of loneliness. They don't know who they can trust, if they can open up to others or lean on them. So learning that it's okay to lean on others, it's okay to accept their help, and that they are here to help you is an important message that I think should be brought through to readers more often.
oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, as a teacher, I'm like literally was so frustrated this week. I'm like, I'm just trying to help you. I'm like, just stop. I'm just trying to help you. And I totally agree. And and I have a lot of, people I work with, in different jobs, the last couple of years, for education and in different schools and in districts and even in states, where my wife, she's a teacher. She came home the other day. She's like, I'm just trying to help this kid. I'm like, I know. So I think that that is also a really cool theme, to try and get out for young adults. And yeah, I think it really only takes just a little bit, like one thought or idea, right, to change your life. So maybe they read your book and think, oh, I could try this, and you never know how that could help people, which is really cool. And you may never know, right? But even if it's like one person, right? I think that that's super cool. So yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah, then it makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We really I always tell people I had a student a while back got a hold of me, and I had actually given him Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game as a eighth grader. And this was like almost like 9, 10 years ago, and he got a hold of me and said, "Hey, I'm about to graduate college." So, first member of his family to ever go to college, let alone to graduate. And all because I gave him a book. It was 99 cents at the time. And I always, always stick with that. And that's why people are like, why do you like writing? I'm like, again, there's so many ideas, that have changed my life. That found family from Star Wars, or just the Jedi Code, or whatever you want to say. Whatever you want to pick. It's just there's so many cool things within books. I think with those common themes that, yeah, that a lot of people could help a lot of people, right? If they just
Yeah.
read a little bit more or read the right book, right? So that's really cool.
Yeah,
That's
I
awesome.
completely agree.
Well, I want to keep rolling here and talking, about your world. So, can you further explain maybe like the gifted and how you went about creating them, and maybe like yeah, anything about them? I just when I read your blurb, I just thought that they just sounded really cool, and just very interesting uh,
Yeah,
world
I
building there.
struggled writing my blurb because there are a few aspects in my book that I don't advertise to readers because I specifically want parts that are surprises for them. And it's really cool every
There.
time someone who's been following my journey for a long time and they'll come across the certain parts that I'm thinking about and they're like, oh my God, Jesse, what? So that's fun. But yeah, going back to the gifted, that's a lot more the basics of the world building. So the idea of the what came before the how. I knew I wanted to write a magic system and I knew that I wanted to have a theme of good versus evil. The gifted are those that received a blessing from the angels, granting them each a gift of unique powers. On the opposite end of the spectrum are the cursed, who receive their powers from greater demons. The cursed are hunted because their curse comes with the drawback that they have this insatiable hunger to devour blessed energy, with all gifted people possess. There's only a small population of those that are born with either of these powers, and they apply to all living beings, including animals. And in my book, all of the main characters happen to be elementalists, so frost, air, water, plant life.
Oh, cool.
Um, but there are countless other types of gifts, such as ones of knowledge, a connection to certain animals. Like one of the professors has a connection specifically to horses, to look into and manipulate dreams, et cetera, et cetera. I have a scene at the end of my book where there's literally, I don't know, I'm not going to give out what the scene is itself, but you get to witness so many powers coming together, and each of them are completely unique. And I love that about the book. The idea that each and every person is unique follows along with the theme of not judging a person by the circumstances of their birth, because I mean, everyone is different and they grow in their own way. And I love the idea of each person is special and that gets reflected in everyone's powers.
Oh, that's really cool. That's a really cool piece of world building. I think that's really neat.
Okay.
Um, I love that aspect. I don't know. I can't get over that. I like that aspect a lot. There's so many ways I think you try to do that, within books, or to show that each member of society, has a part to play. And without them, I always that's like an ongoing theme I do with my students with cultural diffusion. If you tell someone to sit down and shut up, they will, but it harms the rest of us. And we want those ideas, we want them to contribute so we can all be better. So I think that that's just a really cool theme and piece of the world building that you installed there. I also like, from a writer standpoint, my friend, we're always talking about magic systems, and he's like, how do I get a magic system, get people to understand it, but then particularly in a book one, right, like open it up into other possibilities and not box himself into a corner. So I like how you added that so that you could add um, so you can kind of open up the world a little bit, right, for yourself later in case you come up with some cool characters or powers or something like that. So
Yeah,
I
that's the
think
hope.
it's a double-edged sword that I think is going to work really well for you. So I think that's super cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think so too. Thank you.
Yeah, and now I think from just thinking from a sales aspect, there's or store aspect, I think there's just so many cool things that you can do with that, right? Like in terms of merch or something like that, pick your power, or or something like that, or uh,
Mhm.
really cool stuff. I think that's really neat. That's awesome. Um, so what did you focus on the most when it came to your world building? Was it these powers? Was it your themes? Like, I'm just kind of curious that where you kind of like centered yourself, and then where'd you kind of go from there?
Gosh. So again, I pantsed the writing of Frost and Shadows, which means there was no planning involved. I just began writing with no plot in mind and looked to see where it took me, and the world building just kind of came together as I went. I
Oh,
followed the journey of the protagonist, Emma, and allowed it to unfold. So my readers love to tell me that I describe the environment and the wildlife incredibly vividly, which is something that I put extra effort into because I want to reflect my personal passions in my writing. But the rest of it, like the powers, the origins, the academia, because this is also a magic academia book, I just went with the flow and looked to see where my writing took me. It was very much a follow the story of Emma and see where it unfolds. And without even realizing it, I almost had somewhat of an X-Men theme going on with the
oh,
School for the
that's
Gifted.
true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah,
true. That's super cool.
the School for the Gifted, and then you sprinkle in some. I'm gonna go back to like my high school days here. Sprinkle in some Vampire Academy with the badass
Boom.
elementalists and the world
Yeah,
having to protect itself from evil monsters. Add a bit of Grissaver's Shadow and Bone elementalist characters with a society that dictates those with powers. Gotta also have that Shadow Hunters Mortal Instruments Warrior Society with great romance. Some Wings Club for all of the above, plus wings. And the best of friends. And then there's like someone commented that there's Wednesday and Enid vibes, which Emma's best friend in the book very much has Enid vibes from the Wednesday Netflix show.
cool.
And it was never my intention to draw from any of these. It all started with writing a story to pass the time, but inspiration is all around us. I am a heavy reader, and it's both fun and humbling every time a reader messages me or writes a review comparing my book to another one of these incredible series because it was never my intention to draw from any of these other series, but having a reader compare it to these very successful and
Yeah.
incredible books and TV shows is something that humbles me every time.
Oh, that's super cool. I would say you had a lot of really good things there from a lot of really good series. Um, Yeah, Shadowhunters. I just had a girl ask about the other day. She's like, "Have you read this?" I was like book one and two. I was like, I got to get back to them. I was like, "You're definitely gonna enjoy them." I was like, "Buckle up for a really fun ride." Yeah, that's awesome. You just mentioned though, with like inspiration, and I think some people that I talked to recently or asked me questions privately, like I just go with inspiration, right? It could be a TV show, it could be I love art. I used to be um do like illustrating and stuff way back in the day, trying to get back to it, but art speaks to me. D&D games, I have a dark fantasy that there's a campaign I couldn't get over called My Fantasy. It's just like a project I keep going back to, and now it's like turning into an actual book, which is kind of cool in between projects and stuff. But I think you go where the muse takes you, and
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I just think you get really cool things. Dirk Ashton said that he had never read American Gods, and somebody was like, "Hey," read his rough draft or whatever. It's like, "Oh, you have a lot of Neil Gaiman in here," and he's like, "What do you mean?" And they had things that were very similar, But my friend Mark Timmy and I both love Forgotten Realms. We both have The Shadow and the Void. We love Very Good Kind, so we overlap with a lot of the vocab. We use it in totally different ways, and things like that. But it's just cool to see, where people's inspirations take them and, go into these very unique worlds like yours and do really cool things. I think writing it, one of my students the other day said, I think you like writing because it's the ultimate cultural diffusion, aspect. And I'm
Oh,
like,
wow.
that beat my mind. I was like, first of all, this is a freshman, right? I'm like, I felt good about myself, right? Like, and I thought that was so interesting, of an observation, and it just blew my mind. I was like, wow, I think that maybe you're right, because you can read something and then create like such a cool world, and then build off of that. Then I could read your book and then do the same thing, right? And like talk about a legacy, I think that's kind of what we're talking
Yeah.
about, right? With people coming to you and be like, hey, your book's like this, and I just think that's like so cool. And yeah, I cannot wait for that. Myself as an author, I'm like, it's just time. I said to somebody, I was like, I just got to get something out, and it's just time. So I definitely think that's super, super cool. So that's really cool that people are messaging you and and not just reading, right, but letting that you're doing something right, particularly, if you're going to be compared to some of these great series and authors. I think that's really
Yeah,
cool.
I love it. For my Kickstarter, I already sent out all the ebooks to the ebook tiers, and someone that I know bought the ebook from my Kickstarter, and she messaged me saying, "Hey, I'm like 20 pages in. Sorry, I can't read more. Like I have two babies and whatnot." But I absolutely love it, and your writing style is beautiful. And I know that you're doing an audiobook, and I kind of wish that you were the narrator because like I can hear your voice in this.
Oh, that's cool.
And that was really cool because this is someone that I didn't even think is a reader to begin with. So
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
really took me away and like, whoa, she bought my book and she's actually reading it and she loves it. And this is such a great compliment. I find getting compliments from people that don't normally read is
Yeah,
like you were able to get them to not only buy the book to support you, but they're actually reading and enjoying it when normally they don't read books.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that's pretty great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I totally feel it. The kid that made that comment never does my work, but apparently was paying attention. So it made me feel really good. So I totally get it. That's
They
it's
always
so funny.
surprise you.
Yeah, yeah. But that's fun. That is true though, right? Is like, yeah, like somebody they have two babies. I can only imagine. I have just the one. I can barely pick up a book right now. So I can only imagine two. So I give her a lot of credit. But that's really cool. That's yeah, that's got to mean a lot. And and she that she messaged you. So I think that speaks
Yeah,
a lot to your writing. So that keeps you going on those long dark nights in the
it
office,
does. It
coffee shop.
does.
Early mornings, right? Where you're trying to get up before family vacation or go somewhere, and you're just like, you know, chugging the coffee before heading in the car or to the airport. I've been there. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
when my getaway is very much going off on a hiking or camping
Mm.
adventure, and I'm trying to merge the two of, okay, like I can still go on an adventure, but maybe I can bring my laptop with me and write at the same time and be productive. But yes, I am very much guilty of when I finish a project and I just need a break because I just spent 9 months
Yeah,
publishing a book with no life whatsoever outside of it, and I just want to get away. So I'm very much guilty of the getaway part afterwards, and I need to get back into the okay, but your job isn't done and you want to see where this can take you. And getting messages like this is what
yeah,
keeps me going.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, totally. I totally understand that. I'm in that in between right now, waiting on edits and I'm about to get them this week, and I'm just like I have alpha readers waiting, and I'm just like I like can so excited I can barely write anything else. So my wife's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, I just kind of got to get this next step done, and then I can focus on something
Yeah.
else. But yeah, I've needed a little bit of a break, so I don't think you should feel guilty though. I've been feeling guilty too, and my buddy's like, "Don't feel guilty because you need that time." Right, to recuperate. He's like, it's after a workout, right? And um, a really good, session at the gym or, run or like a good hike, he's like, sometimes you just need to rest. So I think that is fair. But I think it goes back to, this common theme that's going on this week in the writing community where, you forget how it's not even just the time you're writing, right? It's the amount of hours you spend. When I drive, like yesterday, we had a little bit of a drive, my son and I, like 50 minutes. I'm putting characters here. I'm doing this, listening to his wiggles or whatever, but I was getting
Yep.
work done, and you know what I mean? And my wife, she's like, you never stop working. I'm like, not as a writer, and I think it's totally okay to take that break or like me to go to bed at 9, with my kid and just, zone out for a couple days. So I don't think you should feel guilty, but I get it though, right? We want to continue and get more of those messages or, hit that next accomplishment. And right, I always tell people, I'm like, writing's addictive, so you got to be prepared. So, but yeah,
The
I think
trick
it's
is learning the balance.
yeah, yeah, yeah. When you figure it out, let me know. So, so,
Likewise.
yeah, if anybody has figured that out, just let us know. That's really funny. So you talked a little bit about, your influences, in terms of reading. Did you have any particular series that influenced you for creating the Institute? And I was kind of curious at like why you chose an institute, as kind of like the location for your novel or that like academy type
Mhm.
of aspect.
So, I mean, the institute itself isn't just one fixed location. This is worldwide. It just so happens that
Ah,
the
cool.
one that Emma got brought to is one of their locations in Northern Ontario.
Mm,
I created the institute because I wanted to create both a safe space for Emma while giving her an obstacle to overcome. So the Institute allowed Emma to stop running, to be herself, to make friends with those that are like her. And yet the Institute is also a dictatorship for those that are gifted, and it separates the gifted from their family, not allowing any contact with them. So it was really fun to discover how Emma grows and faces and makes hard decisions during her time with the Institute. I really found it was vital in the story in itself for all the themes to unfold and to see the character growth in Emma. And as for the location, I myself am Canadian. I'm Quebec born and raised. They say to write what you know. Well, writing a Quebec setting would not make sense for an English book. So I don't want to have to be doing multiple translations for the readers or presenting language barriers. I am bilingual, by the way.
Oh,
So
cool.
I went with Ontario as the setting. More specifically, I chose Timmins because I want a small town that was far enough north that I can write about a boreal forest and incorporate some of the northern wildlife and plants in certain scenes, which was really fun to do.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Timmins allowed me to do that. And I'm currently in the midst of writing book two, and there are a number of scenes in it where Emma and her friends go international, and I look forward to sharing that with everyone.
Oh, that's really cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I just always find it, interesting. My friend and my cover artist, Corey Ratliff, he has his Lucas Hale series. So he's like, I love the Harry Potter and I love the school aspect. So I just always find it interesting how, writers who choose that kind of thing kind of go with those. And I think everybody's always got such a cool, unique, it's not Hogwarts, right? It's always unique. You know what I mean? I just think it's cool.
It
Like
is.
it's
No, you're
Hogwarts,
right.
but it's not, so
I don't think
I
I've
think
read any
cool.
two Magic Academia books that are alike.
That's such a great point. I actually just you just threw that into my head. There's the superhero one, Superhero High that Disney did years ago. I think like Val Kilmer or Kurt Russell was the dad. Uh,
Babylon, was it called? No, Avalon?
no,
I
it was
can't
Sky
remember.
High. It was just
Oh,
like,
yes.
yeah, it was just I don't know, but it was good. It was the kid that was in Oh, the Forbidden Kingdom with Jackie Chan and Jet Li. I forget the actor's name, but he's been in a lot of adult things recently. But he was in a lot of those like young adult movies and stuff in the mid 2000s. But it was cool though, and then but I saw other people do the same thing though, and even those like superhero academies, it wasn't exactly like X-Men, and they each had their different flavor to it. But I think it's the same thing with fantasy or urban fantasy I know I just always find it cool to see how people I think it's cool to see what you enjoyed about, them or, maybe some of those, themes or those places, within something like Shadowhunters, but also, combining other elements. So I think that's why, right, we don't see anybody really have, the same thing necessarily, and everybody sets them up different, has different
Yeah.
rules. So it's just always such a cool setting, I think, to see where people's ideas lead them. But I think that's
Yeah, I
awesome.
think the most unique version of Magic Academia I've ever read was, I never know how to pronounce it, Babel by R.F.
Oh, yeah,
Kuang.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
It is an absolute masterpiece. Definitely
Oh,
my favorite 2023 standalone read.
oh, cool, cool.
And the extent to how unique it was, I have no idea how the author was able, like I understand the storyline a bit more, I how she could come across writing it, but the setting of the Babel in Academy in the book just blows my mind how she came up with it.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, that one actually, somebody had just told me, like reminded me actually, like, hey, you need to put this on your list. I'm like, I'm trying. I think I need to start upping my Audible game from just the basic to
Read the
uh,
trigger warnings. That's it. It will destroy you. There are a lot of really, really hard themes, but if you can get past the trigger warnings, it
yeah, yeah.
is an absolute masterpiece.
Awesome. I'll definitely have to check that out. Cool. Um, So, okay, this is always the hardest one, I think, when I go and try and do this, whether it's urban fantasy, sci-fi, or any type of fantasy. If you could have one power from your world, what would it be and why?
I've thought about that a lot. I mean, who hasn't? Who hasn't thought of if I could have any power, what would it be?
I know,
And
right?
I genuinely can't decide on a single one. my mind keeps going back to like flying would be cool, but flying could be incorporated in many different forms of power. So
Fair, yeah.
transformation would be really, really cool. Being able to
Oh,
shift into any animal, which would include any avians and
yeah,
flying.
yeah.
And then like the badassness of like having the strong muscles of a jaguar or a lion or like
Oh,
just
yeah.
scurrying around like a mouse. Like they're I just cannot imagine. That would be so cool. But then I also love the idea of being able to communicate with animals since I'm such a wildlife buff and I'm very much a heavy dog mom. Being, yeah, being an elementalist would be really cool. Like my main characters in my book, but not as cool as transformation, in my opinion.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
manipulation of time is a big one. Like being able
Oh,
to
that's a
go
good
back
one.
in time, stop it, jump to the future, but that could get tricky with not
Yeah.
messing up the order of things, invisibility. The list goes on. There's so many possibilities. I just can't choose.
Came up with a really cool superhero there, or maybe came up with a cool conglomeration. I always think of like people like Jessica Biel and Nicolas Cage in the movie Next. They did such a good job with the world building because Nicolas Cage's character is a magician, but he actually does like real magic essentially. What the only thing he can do is he can see the future 60 seconds or something like that. But when you actually, I encourage people to watch the movie because it's great world building because he is able to do this. So in a fight, right? If he gets beat up or whatever, he can come back the next time and know exactly where you're going to be. Or if he
Yeah.
gets shot, right, he can avoid the bullets or whatever. There's just so many cool things you could do with just 60 seconds. And I just thought it was one of the best written, pieces of world building for a power, but having that 1 minute restriction, it was just
Mhm.
so cool, So like if you know, oh, I step in this building, it's going to blow up in a minute. It's like, well, how do you still get away or how do you survive or whatever, So it just from a
Yeah.
writer's aspect, I just always thought it was really cool. So I think you bring up some good points. I actually never considered being a jaguar. I always think of flying. I love panthers, my spirit animal, so I think that would be one I'd have to definitely do for sure. So I have to think about
Yeah.
being there. So that's really cool.
Like
I
the
would
most
say
common one that
gator.
people think of are wolves because there are so many like wolf shifter books out
Yeah, yeah,
there.
yeah.
There are so many possibilities. Or like even being like, I don't know, a dolphin or a sea turtle swimming in the ocean.
True. Yeah, yeah.
Any of these would be just so cool. In my next book, I incorporate a new mini character, which is a European lynx. And I can't wait to incorporate that because I'm such a strong animal person. It's hard to write. In my book, all in book one, all of the animals that are mentioned are essentially cursed and they don't exactly have the best of endings. So I really wanted to have that nice animal companion aspect in book two because of how much I love wildlife, and I really look forward to incorporating that character.
Cool, cool. I love cats, like cat folk and fantasy or sci-fi. If it's got a cat person in it, I will just read it. Like, which is ironic because I'm not a big like cat person, but like big cats, I just find them absolutely fascinating. So
Tiger's
anytime,
Curse. I don't know if
oh,
you've ever read that book, but or I think it's a duology or a trilogy. I read it back in high school and I loved it. But two tigers are the main character,
oh,
the
that's
main
cool.
love interest.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tiger's Curse. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I have to check that out. That's really cool. There was like I was reading a random sci-fi that somebody gave me for free. It was like it was Mark Cooper, Heavy Duty, and I was like, "Oh, okay, and then it's like chapter one, and then it gets to like chapter two, and it's like this planet with these cat folk, and I was like, oh, I'm in. And then ended up being an amazing book. I keep forgetting I gotta go back and like read or listen to book two. But I mean it was like super cool and his world building was amazing. And I never thought of, catful like that. So that just like a Johnny from Magic the Gathering. But yeah, Mark like set my journey on cat folk. So I'll have to definitely check that out. Anytime they're in something, I'll check them out. Well, that's really
Add
awesome.
it to the
Well, that's
long
a great
list.
answer. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I always call it my mountain range. I used to call my mountain, now it's my mountain range. But I want to make sure we got enough time though to talk about, your news updates, current projects, anything like that you can share with us. Love to, get any news, anything like that, updates for your Kickstarter, whatever you got, go right ahead.
Yeah, so I just successfully completed a Kickstarter campaign to produce my book Frost and Shadows into an audiobook. And if it all goes well, the audiobook will be out in May. I am super excited for that. My backers get early access, but then it'll be available to the wider world. And other than that, I'm really busy right now fulfilling all the Kickstarter rewards, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
also in the midst of slowly writing book two. Unlike book one, I fully plotted this one, and I'm so excited to see it completed. Actually, last year I participated in, no, not last year, in 2022, I participated in NaNoWriMo, and I successfully wrote 50,000 words in 1 month. And I pantsed it and I scrapped it because even though I liked it, I wasn't in love with it. So I pretty much started from the beginning and I plotted out all of book two, and I'm so in love with how it comes together, how I go deeper into the world of world building, and I'm just so excited to get that out to people. I'm only 17K words into my first draft,
yeah.
so I'm in no rush to get it out to the world, and I wrote book one so that it finishes as a standalone. So anyone that reads the first book,
Cool.
they don't need to be pining over a sequel because it can end right there if they so wish. But I hope to get book two out and continue the journey. That would be a really fun idea. It'd be also really cool to launch another Kickstarter where I can do a special edition omnibus.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But all that to say, once it's out, I plan on launching this Kickstarter, and I know exactly what I want to do for the campaign, but that's all for another day, one step at a time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, that's super cool. Anybody for our audience, just make sure that, when you're reading or, listening, hopefully for audiobook for Jesse, that, you are reviewing those products. It helps everybody, which is our theme, right? All creators, even the cover artists. Somebody mentioned that to me the other day, the copy editors, right? For even just your book covers on Audible or wherever you're listening, to these products. And I was like, that's true. There's a lot of people that go into helping us, right? As authors or creators. So I want to make sure we're reviewing all those products. It helps everybody for that, those products. Thank you so much, Jesse, for coming on. It was awesome. Yeah, I really look forward to, reading your book. I look forward to hearing more Kickstarter news and, news about book two. I'm sure once I'm done with, your book, I'll have plenty of questions. So we'll have to have you back on and chat about those. I love just like what you're doing with world building. So I can't wait to see what you're doing with different aspects. I love learning as a reader and then applying that knowledge as a writer. So it's one of my favorite things to do. So I love to interview people like yourself, and then I always get the director's cut, and then when I go and read, I feel like I learn twice as much as a writer that way. It's just been my process. People are like, why don't you read first? I'm like, some people I've read in the past. I go, other people, I haven't had a chance to get to, but I will, and it's definitely enhanced my experience. So it's just really cool as a writer to get to, use that experience that I've learned from you guys and kind of go from there as a reader. So it's really cool. If there's anything else I can do to help you out, in the meantime, just let me know and, hit me up, either email, TikTok, something like that. And I'd love to help you out in any way we can, with your Kickstarter, get news updates out there, whatever we can do, just let me know.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, anytime. Well, I hope you have a good rest of the day, Jesse. Good luck with, your Kickstarter and, book two, especially. I can't wait to hear your ideas on that. But other than that, I hope you have a good rest of the day and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, see you later.
Bye.
Bye.